Yes, welcome back. This is F a Rap Critic. I am Malik 16, and no, the walls are not closing in on us. We're actually getting closer to the walls. That didn't make a lot of sense, did it?
Yeah. There's a lot of things here.
There's a lot of history. We are archivists at our finest, and again, I have my very special guest. Got my uncle with me, Kwame. Actually, I drag out the Kwame like the rapper. It's Kwame, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's no, well, there's definitely wrong ways to say it, but those aren't.
Okay. And, he may not use these titles for himself, but expert on the culture, expert on hip-hop history, industry veteran extraordinaire. So, can you tell them where they could find you at once again?
I do a program called Equilibrium Radio up at WHCR. That's been going on since about 2004. And before that, I started at the same station, WHCR 90.3 FM, in 1992 on a program called Hardcore Righteousness. And, we played hip hop for about a couple of years. So, been attached to the music for a long time, been attached to hip hop since I found it somewhere, and since you mentioned Demented Minds in the previous segment, we did a video show on Manhattan Neighborhood Network called Demented Minds, and we did skits, we played the music videos of the time, and we think we were pretty funny. So,
and this is category 2, where we go over the rap performance on the album. A lot of people consider this the greatest hip-hop album of all time. We're talking about none other than Public Enemy's 1988 sophomore release, It Takes a Nation of Millions to Hold Us Back. And I'm not going to waste any of your time. We're going to jump right into it. The first dimension in category 2 is the level of personality and charisma that was expressed on the album. How much personality and charisma do you think was displayed by the group here?
The primary voices is Flavor Flav and Chuck D. And Flavor Flav represents the street guy, and then Chuck represents the hard MC intellect guy.
Right.
So that's two personalities right there. But here's the thing. Those two guys mesh and get along well. Flav comes in with these ad-libs and all his personality and enhances what Chuck is doing. So from the performance standpoint, it gives you a little bit more meat, because Chuck doesn't have to. I mean, he's working hard because he's written the lyrics and he's performing the lyrics, but Flav comes in there and gives that extra oomph that you need from a personality standpoint. Yeah. I think they, especially in the early days, they performed well. Chuck definitely had the hunger and had the MC mentality, which is very important. You got the MC mentality. You let MCs know that I'm not a guy to play around with. I'll get you. I'll say some stuff and hurt your feelings. So, and then you got Flav, who is probably the guy who is standing right behind you, while Chuck's trying to tell you, "Hey man, I told you." I think Flav is a little bit more emotion based, where Chuck is coming from
cerebral.
That's a great word right there. I'll take that term. He's coming from a more cerebral place, but he's letting you know that he's still an MC, and he'll give you some MC bars.
And I think you mentioned these are still, at this point they're still young men in their 20s, whether it was mid 20s or not. Mm-hmm. They still enjoy the spoils of competition and being at a party, they're not too serious where, you know, they don't want you to have a good time while listening to them. It's just that they go about it in two different ways. And so like the best comedy duos or the best pairs where one is the straight man and one is the other character, that's what you get here. And I don't think hip hop had a lot of that at that point. Most people were even tier. You had Eric Sermon and Parrish Smith. They were kind of like brothers almost. This was like brothers in a different way. Like, oh, this is my silly little brother, but I'll beat you over him. I'll still fight you over him. And I think the synergy was the other element. Them saying, this is the unit. Them being able to finish each other's sentences, whether it was, you know, Chuck D telling Flav, hey, say this line to end my sentence or not. On wax, it gets executed. Like, I'm not even going to finish this line. Flavor's going to finish it for me. And Flavor actually tends to be the one that takes the role of, yo, Chuck, you want me to handle this?
Yeah.
So there's always, you mentioned the word levity. I think Flav creates the levity on the album, but this is still a version of PE where there was levity in general. Even if Flavor wasn't on there, Chuck was still a little less hardened than he became on some other projects. And you hear it, and you know, we'll talk about this more as we go into the next dimension, but something to consider about the personality and charisma on this album. Charisma allows Flavor Flav to have that solo where he's just freestyling the whole time. You gotta like him to listen to that all the way through and not skip. But something to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats takes us to dimension 2, the suspension of disbelief or the level of believability. Now, suspension of disbelief is just something that comes up if it's an album where you're being asked to accept that this person is assuming a character. I don't think this is that kind of album. I think they're kind of saying they are who they are.
Yeah.
Right? So then the question is, how much do we believe them on this album?
Oh, I absolutely believe 100% because, you know, let's if we take it back to 1988, all you have is what's said, right? And then, you know, you move it beyond that, and you know about just the character of each individual, just in their history of dealing with the public. These guys have been exactly who they are, or who you thought they were on record. There's no deviation from that. So, you know, it's just been proven, you know, as time has gone on that, okay, cool, yeah, this Flav is the character of the street guy. You know what? A lot of these artists are brilliant artists. I mean, they could be playing a character, and the character could be them. But, you know, that's not the only thing that they are, right? You know, Flavor is not just a guy with a clock around his neck, right? Flavor is this guy who can play piano. Flavor is this guy who's just who he is in all the iterations of who he is. Chuck is, you know, the leader, musician, rapper guy.
Yeah. The voice
of the group. And that's what it is. Yeah. So, do I believe it? Absolutely. 4, 5 heartbeats on it.
I've always been a fan of rappers who address speculation. You know, some people are like, don't feed it. You don't have to feed into it to address it. Your rap is your platform. So I've always thought Jay-Z and Eminem, they're great examples of people who, all right, the 2 years that passed since your last album, it's like, oh, on this song, they're speaking on this thing that you've been waiting to hear them do. This was Public Enemy doing that on this album. We've mentioned how songs like Louder Than a Bomb, Prophets of Rage, Bring the Noise, that's their credo. They're telling you who they are, what they represent, and how they're not going to change it, despite what detractors say. But then there's songs like Don't Believe the Hype, where they're addressing what has been said about them. So, you know, these are the guys telling you, yeah, we are who, you know, we are saying we are. There's no facade here. We're representing this, and we're, you know, I keep saying it, they were doubling down on it. So I think believability, as much as it is a personal preference, like, you might be like, oh, they capped, they wasn't living like that, they was dating white women, and you know, but on this particular album, I agree. I feel like the believability level was high, something for you to rank on a scale from 1 to 5. Heartbeats takes us to dimension 3. Now we get into it. The delivery and the use of the voice on this album.
Boom. Chuck and Flav have real distinctive voices. Chuck has a voice of God type of authority in his voice and in his delivery, and with cadence and everything. And Flav it's slightly raspy to a certain degree, but is very pointed.
Yeah.
And those two voices together, I mean, you can get it from someplace else, but with them two, at that time when they released it and going forward, it's just, you kind of expect it. It's like every great group has great voices, and it's beautiful to hear.
It's understanding the voice as an instrument. We talk about this a lot on this channel. I think they got it. This album without Flavor would have, okay, there's message music, but he would have been Paris without, Flavor on it. And this album without Chuck D would have kind of just run its course a little earlier than the 16 songs allowed. I don't know how much of that one voice you could take, but together, that's where the compelling element comes. And so on songs like Party for Your Right to Fight, you see, this is the mastery of it. Hearing them rappers weren't doing that. That's something from the Cold Crush era. We're going to harmonize, we're going to overdub, we're both going to say the same words at the same time, with the contrast of your deep voice and my higher voice, even though it has that rasp. And then there's songs where the back and forth help it. Songs like Rebel Without a Pause and Don't Believe the Hype. Yo, Chuck, you must be on the pipe, right? I'm going to my media. I reference this Shock G interview all the time because to hear Shock G break down the different spaces that rappers come from, it's one of those things where rap still doesn't get its respect. You hear singers break down how you can sing from the diaphragm or you have your chest voice. So Shock had this whole thing where he said Slick Rick is nasal, Nas is throaty. Okay. And he said Tupac came from the belly. He said it was a very Martin Luther King preaching oratory kind of thing. And I'm like, man, what would be Pac's influence? Where did he get that from? And I'm like, why couldn't you factor Chuck D in there? Chuck D's the original, like I mentioned the word bullhorn. I remember as a young kid not really gravitating towards Chuck D so much because he sounds like a dad. Because when I'm like I came in a room and I don't like his dad rap. I used to like Kool Moe Dee and Dougie Fresh. They just seem slicker. I like the slick rap, special ed. So Chuck D is a very mature, and I think you used the word authoritative voice. But the contrast of having Flav there is genius because it adds that youthful feeling. Flav is bringing this exaggerated voice. His talking voice, he sound like a regular, he's from Long Island. Flav sound like a Brooklyn cat when you hear him talk. Like, son, we ain't trying to kid. But when he's rhyming, he's like, dragging words out. That's that youthful element with that dad element. It's genius to put them together.
Yeah.
And so that gets played up. Just a decision to whisper on Louder Than the Bomb. Like, do his whole verse in his regular cadence and be like, cause I'm louder than a bomb. They knew what they were doing with their voices. There's a command of voice on this album. So something to consider on the scale from 1 to 5. Heartbeats, dimension 4, the most important, flow.
Well, I mean, if we're talking about flow, that's when Chuck still cared about being a great MC. And he still cares about it. It's just as you get older, it's a less is more approach to it. And some people are great at less is more. Some people are not as great as less is more as they age and do it that way. But at the time, with this particular album and album that came after it, he was so in the pocket with how he was flowing. So it wasn't just what he was saying, it was how he was saying it and how it sounded over the music. And that's, you know, and it's powerful. It's like power. It's like, I remember I was reading an interview, and Pharoah Monch, it was a Pharoah Monch interview where he was making the perfect MC. And he was like, I would have the authority of Chuck D. I would have the vocabulary of KRS-One. I would have this, you know, he said something about Rakim. All these guys who would make, if you was to merge these guys into one person. And Pharoah Monch is a pretty formidable MC, we would say, right? He has a tremendous talent and skill, right? But you know, he doesn't mention himself in this building of an MC. And I'm like, you know, Chuck is just the authority, but his flow, like, we're talking about technique when we're talking about flow,
right,
at this point. And his technique is incredible. That's the reason why we're still talking about this album.
And speaking of incredible, once again, right? And so I'm so glad you said what you said. Such an honest, you know, viewpoint to say, yeah, he still cared. Because in the subsequent, maybe right after Fear of the Black Planet, it did become more this talk style. I'm not caring how much I ride the beat. And so I'm glad you also said in pocket, because I'm guilty of using that term every damn episode. I find a way to say nuance and in pocket, but he was in pocket. So there's a song in particular, Bring the Noise. It's a masterclass in MCing. The first verse, he comes and he does the standard Chuck D rhyme pattern, the A-B rhyme scheme. You know, bass, how low can you go, right? And then the second verse, he does that verse entirely in one of the earliest examples of the triplet flow, which y'all kids call the Migos flow. But he's rapping for the entire verse. And then the final verse, he flips it up one more time, and it's all couplets. It said, like, there's this one line where he goes, like, oh no, it's like Yoko, oh no, everything rhymes in a 1 bar sequence of couplets. Like, Roar exit, Terminator exit. It's just like everything is, so 3 different flows for each verse. And that's how the album starts. So he definitely still cared. And the next song, much calmer, Don't Believe the Hype, it's just the calm, but he's showcasing some of those flows. And you really, you know, again, not growing up listening to Public Enemy in album formats, I had only heard songs. I heard songs from Bum Rush the Show after I heard this. So the first time I heard Public Enemy number one, I was like, I didn't know Chuck D could rap like that. I didn't know he was flowing, spitting. He was spitting. Like he was just going, not just this, you know, by the time I was paying attention to Public, they were coming out with songs like Can't Trust It, and it was just kind of like talking. So yeah, I love what you said about the fact he cared, and it shows, because there's different flow patterns all throughout this album. And then you get Flavor's solo, and he's the original ODB, if you ask me. There's no father to his style. He's just gonna get on there and go where the beat takes him.
Let me add one thing.
Go ahead.
There's a story that Chuck normally tells that when he first came out and he was rapping, he was someplace he was rapping, and Melly Mel, Grandmaster Melly Mel, booed him off the stage, and Chuck went up to him and said, "Hey, what's wrong?" He said, "You whack, do better." And Chuck didn't get mad. Chuck, well, I mean, maybe he was disappointed and maybe he was mad, but the next question was, well, I guess I'm gonna have to go and do better, because the first greatest MC in the world said, "Go and do better."
If you don't use it for fuel, then it's your undoing. Yeah.
In those days, there was a system, there was a respect where it was like, okay, well, if somebody who's a veteran is telling you, listen, you could do this differently or better, or they have advice, and sometimes advice may not come in a way that you want to hear it, or it may not come in a way that feels like it is, that you can hear it, because they don't necessarily know you personally.
Right.
But he went and did better.
Yeah.
And he did so much better that, years later, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, Grammy honoree.
Right.
You're talking about, he took that and made that into something.
And they even say F a Grammy on this album, but the irony. You never know what you appreciate later on. That's another thing Chuck does, I forgot to mention. He starts a lot of sentences when he flows with a new word. And he'll pause on that word and then rap radio. It's like, it's not just this continuous, it's like, here's the start of a new sentence from this bold word that I say. The decisions made, manipulating with voice and flow.
Yeah.
So something to consider on the scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats. Dimension 5, the wordplay and the bar intent on this album. I don't think, this is a group that is infamous for doing all these crafty dafty things with words. It's a direct messaging that is the stamp of this group. Bar intent, though, there's intention behind almost every sentence on this album, with the exception, and even you could argue on Flavor's solo, he does this part, he even has a line in there, he's like, this is for the made up word listeners, or because he knows that he's just throwing words together at the end, and he has inside jokes about it. He's like, it probably doesn't make sense to you, but it makes sense because you need flavor in everything you eat, so everything I just mentioned with the flavor for you. And I'm like, okay, there's nonsensical sense that's going on there.
Yeah. It's not even. It goes without saying because of who this group is. The intent is there. You know what their intention is when you listen to the songs. And even the ones that are lighter, even the ones that don't sound as great as you think they should sound. Well, that don't sound as great as the others that you really like. The intent is there in each song, and it's hard to argue with it. It's really hard to argue with it.
And it's rhetorical and poetic devices used. We talked about metaphor on some of the songs. The 2 songs, Channel Zero and Night of the Living Bassheads, they're playing in metaphorical territory. As you pointed out, the she in Channel Zero represents anybody who's just lost. And just following misinformation and deprioritizing. And then the bass, the whole play off of bass being either musical bass or the bass incorporating crack rock, it's a tale of 2 different forms of bass. You'd be addicted to this music while they're talking about this real serious drug pandemic or epidemic in the height of the 80s. So there's not these. Thank you. There's not these metaphors in the sense of battle rap metaphors, but there's metaphors in this song structure kind of thing. And you're getting similes, but you're getting the similes of the time, of the 1980s. Again, there's the very few punchline rappers in the 1980s, and I guess that takes us to the next dimension. So something to rank and consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats, wordplay and bar intent. Dimension 6, punchlines. I always say, I think in the 80s, you had a couple. You had Big Daddy Kane. You had Lord Finesse. Guys that were like, you knew the verses are going to be packed in punchlines. I don't think the hip-hop community had caught on to how significant punchlines were going to be. So that was more of like a style thing back then. Like, oh, if that's what you like to do. It became a requirement for New York rappers in the 90s. But back then, Big Daddy Kane's the only one. Put a quarter in your ass because you played yourself. Like,
Well, he was the main one.
He was the main one.
Yeah, he was the one that you would point to and say, yeah, that guy does that.
Yeah. Back then it was more about descriptive braggadocio. Like, I'm this to the that, and I'll do this,
Yeah. And while, it's pretty much straightforward on this particular PE album, Chuck was just rhyming so fly.
That's
like, really,
a good way to put it.
Really, it's like when it comes down to it, it's like rhyming so fly, it don't make a difference if he was doing metaphors or similes or just straight bragging. Straight bragging. He was.
Because the other end of that, the other part of this dimension is punchlines or poetic wisdom, basically the overall quotability. So there's plenty of rappers that were not these punchline gurus, but gave us words to live by. Simplistic wisdom. And I think Chuck represents that school of thought where he said enough memorable things on his album, or food for thought things, or things in poetic language that resonate.
Yeah. Agreed.
Even making the choice to say, and now I'm looking for the steal, instead of saying I'm reaching for a gun so I can break out of prison. Then changing that to now I'm reaching for the fence to let you know, we're escaping from prison. Can I tell them that I really never had a gun? It was just the wax that the Terminator X spun. Like, think about how many lines from this album were used in other rap songs later on, right? There's quotables here, if nothing else.
Indeed.
Yeah. So something to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats. The height of 1988. Punchlines, poetic wisdom. Dimension 7. I've been waiting for this. Concepts. The concepts on this album, and you also mentioned that this album itself.
Yeah, it's. I was thinking about concept albums, just in general. I was thinking about making it a Facebook post. What are the great concept albums that came out of hip hop culture? And this album could be included in that.
How so?
Just because of the nature of the content, and it was strung together so well. Like, it was like each song was put in its specific place that made it all coherent. And you can draw a story out of it if you want to. But it's not necessarily its strong suit, because it doesn't open up saying, I'm going to tell you a story with this, with all of the songs on this album.
Right.
But if you read the titles of the songs, you're like, oh, I can see where I could make a story out of all this, right? So it is a possibility that it could be it could be considered a great concept album, but not necessarily just because it was just a great album. You don't throw concept on top of it,
right?
Like, say, the second and third Organized Confusion albums, like Stress the Extinction Agenda, concept album.
Clearly, they make it. I think the best concept albums let you know that they're concept albums from the outset.
Yeah, and then the Equinox, which was the follow-up album to that, which was another concept album, which was masterful and genius.
It's possible, I think, to be an album that maybe not is a concept album, but has conceptual songs on it.
Yeah.
And we discussed, Night of the Living Bass has conceptual. She Watched Channel Zero, maybe the most conceptual song on here, because it's abstract in a way. It's not. Out of all the songs that they're doing, which are mostly straightforward, this requires you to have to kind of figure out, and get where they're going with it. And so, I think you raised an interesting point. I'd love to hear what y'all think, about the conceptuality or the conceptual levels on this album. So something to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats. I usually put these two together, dimensions 8 and 9, because they're both the content dimensions. And this is 8, how much external content was there? Talking about things outside of themselves, social ills, politics, environmental stuff. Internalizes how much internal monologue, feelings, rap was there on this album.
Well, I would say that, oh wow, that's...
Exposition is what I mean.
Yeah,
this is easy, because Chuck D and Flavor are not telling you about their life. I grew up on Long Island. You're not getting that. You're not getting I'm from a middle class household. I went to college and I met Flavor. Like, those tales aren't being told. Or sometimes I want to cry in my bedroom, but you are getting a lot of commentary on the things they do care about, which is where I agree with you. They put who they are into it.
Yeah.
But we get topics. We got topics on there. What's the name of the song where they talk about sampling? I forgot what that is.
Shoot, I can't remember.
Can I Get a Witness?
There we go. Yes.
Damn, I forgot the first word on that, but it's something. Can we get a witness? Caught up? Can we get a witness or something? But Can I Get a Witness is a song all about sampling. Don't Believe the Hype is about the media. Critique of Public Enemy. Bassheads about bassheads. Party for Your Right to Fight is like this history lesson. They talk about the Panthers and Garvey, a couple prominent Black history figures. Black Still in Our Chaos is a tale. So you get more external content than anything here. They're talking about different things.
Yeah, indeed. They're definitely talking about the conditions of the world, coming from their perspective and coming from the perspective of people. I don't want to say like Black people. It's primarily that experience because they're Black men who was making the art, right? But people who are dealing with being oppressed. So I think that's a more accurate way to describe it. At least I believe so. So people who are dealing with oppression and trying to fight back against that or survive it. They're speaking to a lot of that in this particular album. So yeah,
I can dig it.
Yeah, so that part is very strong. The other part locked my brain up for a second because I'm like, I'm trying to separate the art from the artist and the artist from the art, and I can't because they've never been. I don't see them as separate.
Yeah, it's hard because some rappers just never give you that. Some rappers never give you them, and some rappers do. Public Enemy is famous for always talking about social issues. Yeah, things that matter in the greater scheme for the collective. Even when they rap about themselves, they're rapping about the group. Yeah, as much I talk as there's we talk. Yeah. So something to consider on the scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats. There is so many different topical things that are discussed here. Some would say the caught up. Can I Get a Witness? Is lighter fare because it's not as political. It's more about our freedom of expression as artists. Final Dimension. Now this one is special because I kind of got this from you. I remember you said this on your radio show back in the day that the true measure of a great MC is their storytelling capability. I'm not quoting you verbatim, but you've said this, and I always that stuck with me as a rule for rap, and I think it's maybe a rule that mattered more in the 90s, but the storytelling on this album.
Wow. There's a lot of situational theories spoken about in the songs. Telling straight stories. I don't think that's a particular strength, but
Black Still in the Hour of Chaos is the only straightforward story here.
Yeah, that's the one where it's a story about being in jail, being in prison
for draft dodging.
Yeah, and then escaping.
Yeah.
So it's a matter of that story, and I got my tape and I gotta let the next song play, and I'm waiting for the next song to get, because like I said, that isn't one of my favorite songs necessarily in the beginning. So it's being able to tell a story is very important if you're going to rap. I think you should have at least one story song on the album if you are rapping. It could be any story. I ain't got to agree with it. I ain't got to like it. I would just like to know that you can tell a story. Like Lil Wayne did Dr. Carter.
Yeah.
And I was like, before I heard that song, I was like, oh, this boy is horrible.
Yeah.
And then I heard that, I was like, oh, he could really rap. Okay. Who knew? Who knew? So telling the story is appealing to me.
Right.
And it doesn't even make a difference the music genre. I want to hear a story with R&B. I want to hear a story with country. I want to hear, I want to hear the soul of the artist in all the musical categories. But storytelling, like you have so many words to play with in a rap song.
Mm-hmm.
So being able to tell a story, I think is paramount. It's really paramount for a rapper to be able to do that.
And that's exactly why I included it. And that's a mic drop moment. That's the perfect place to end it on, because it literally came from you, sir. And that's just something for y'all to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats. The storytelling on this album, as you point out, there's story elements on other songs, but the only real straight story here is Black Still in the Hour of Chaos, and you either like it or you don't. But it's, that's our category 2 review of this classic album, considered to be the greatest hip-hop album of all time. Your votes and ranking will determine that. We'll see if this still holds up. Until then, I'd like to thank you for being my very special guest, Unc. Sir, this was an amazing trip down memory lane from a different perspective of someone who lived it differently than I did, and you've enlightened me. You've given me food for thought for sure. If y'all haven't listened to the album, go check it out, and also go find EQ Radio.
Yeah, Equilibrium Radio, EQ Radio NYC, because there's a lot of Equilibrium radios all over the world. So, but we had to say, it's a word. It's just like any word. People use words.
The humility.
So it's EQ Radio NYC. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and also since we still are doing Equilibrium Radio, it comes on every Monday from 10 p.m. to 12 p.m. And for those of you who don't live in the Harlem area, Harlem NYC, or the Queens, or Jersey, or the various places where you hear it on old school analog radio, you can check us out at WHCR.org, which is WHCR 90.3 FM on the radio. And that's what it is.
It's worldwide. That's the global hip hop community.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, y'all. It's been a pleasure. Until next time, F a Rap Critic. We talk about it while I live it. Social media, where can they find you right now?
On social media, you can look.
I'm talking about Equilibrium Radio.
EQ Radio NYC. You Google that. You'll find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube.
Yeah, and YouTube. Yeah, there you go. Where we are now.
Yeah.
That was the best response ever. You can try. That's kind of my response too when it comes to that.
Yeah.